that negative bias, it can be like a pessimistic framework. People look at glass half full, glass half empty, and that again can be quite a toxic thing. I think learning to be objective about what you see, try and avoid that sort of bias, understand and prepare for the worst, expect the best. The ball's going to drop somewhere between those two. If you have a constant negative bias, it's going to be very hard for you to do anything because you'll always undermine your self-confidence and your self-belief to actually do it. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we are talking about psychology and money. For many people, these two things are inextricably linked. And in fact, it's one of the biggest breakthroughs you will ever have on your wealth journey by learning to cut that umbilical cord. Lots of personal anecdotes in this, something we don't normally do, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of inspiration and understanding behind the decisions we make, how we make them, why we make them. As always, make sure you take plenty of notes, but most importantly, please do take plenty of action. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my co-host and offsider, Mitch Olarenshaw.
You're going to play my psychologist today, AB, because we're talking about the psychology of money, not just when it comes to investing, but everything, spending, investing, saving, budgeting, all of the above.
Sounds like fun. Kick your shoes off on the couch. Let's see how we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Pour me a glass of water. Let's get stuck in. So the psychology of money. Now, there's some biases and some stories that a lot of people will carry around throughout their life. What are they? How does this affect them?
Look, the two obvious ones when it comes to investing are fear and greed. You know, the fear of losing money and then the motivation of greed as to how much you can make. And those two things are opposite sides of the seesaw. But I'll actually probably take it back a little step. And where those seeds of emotion around money come from is what we call our money stories. Actually, something we cover in the book. What are your beliefs around money? And probably one of the easiest ways of getting that out on the table for those people listening right now, they've got a pad and paper. Just answer this in two words, instant reaction. Don't intellectualize it. If somebody said to you, money is what? What's your answer to that? And typically you get responses
like,
like,
answer? Or?
I'd be interested to know what yours is. Yeah.
Freedom.
Freedom, okay. Which is an emotional word.
Yeah.
Choices, freedom, security, they're all emotional words.
Yep.
Money's just money. It's just a unit of exchange. That's all it is. Yet as human beings, we bring so much emotional baggage to what that money is because we then look and see what it can do for us when we have it or what we miss out on sometimes if we don't have it. So it's a very, very complex subject.
That's interesting. So the motivation for wanting money or wanting success, can it be driven by that factor that a person might write down on a piece of paper?
That is the outcome of having it, but it's not what it is. And we attach too much meaning to it in that regard.
Okay, so, interesting.
You think about when we do goal setting, goal setting is all about not the goal itself. It's about the person you become to become the person worthy of having that goal or achieving it. It's a habit and everything that goes alongside it. Same with money. You think about freedom. Well, what does that mean? Choice as to who you spend your time with, when you want to do stuff, who you want to do it with, where you want to do it. And having
better problems, I'd say.
Having better problems.
Yeah.
Big problems come with having a lot of money too for some people. They'll say
right.
It's the root of all evil, which is a terrible money story. The reality is money is just money. It amplifies who you are.
So self-diagnosing this for anyone listening to this, because I'm sure we all have an emotional attachment to money in some way, probably from childhood, how you were brought up, your external influences, what school you went to and so forth. Is there a good, is there a bad? Is there changes that need to be made? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think certainly in the early work I do with people, sometimes some of the easiest clients to work with are people that have never invested before. And part of the reason for that is they're a blank canvas. They don't have any previous experience, which they may see as a disadvantage. But if that previous experience isn't good, it's actually a disadvantage. You've got to rehab people to say, look, let's build a new ending to that previous journey you went on into the world of investing. So, I think having a clean slate can be a good thing. But understanding where you sit around the money journey, is it abundant? And let's face it, it is. There's more money today than there's ever been on the planet. And by the time I finish that sentence, there'll be even more because, the printing presses in the US are hard at it, printing even more to fund that $35 trillion deficit. There's more money around. So it's a question of how you see that in yourself. Also, when it comes to money, one of the worst things you can do is benchmark against other people. And in today's social media driven world where people can often look like they're in a very good place in life, but in fact it's just all smoke and mirrors and just some photos, that can create a resentment and a really false set of beliefs or marker points, if you will, to set you on your journey. So
that's why I don't have social media, for example.
Don't compare to other people, compare to yourself, because if you don't benchmark externally and you benchmark internally, you just become a better person, whereas if you benchmark externally, you become resentful.
Indeed. All right, I like that. So a good starting point, figuring out what your story is, then going through some of the biases that we had. So fear and greed you mentioned.
Yep.
Over underconfidence is probably two that would stand out to me.
Yep.
Any others?
They would be the main ones. And again, don't underestimate how important those money stories can be. But just because you have a money story doesn't mean to say you can't change it. So
of course.
if I take my father as an example, my father is extremely risk averse. He worked extremely hard for his money. He had nothing as he was younger, and he's in a pretty wealthy position right now. But that belief system that he has is something I had to, no pun intended, cut the umbilical cord on in order to achieve what I've achieved in my life. To say, look, that was a great place to start. And my dad's been on our podcast. He's an incredible person.
Cracker.
I love him dearly. And it's, at some point, you've got to say, that's got me to here. And it's like stages in a rocket. That's got me to here. That stage drops off, and you're responsible for the next level of propulsion. And when you've outgrown that particular belief system or view of the world, you've got to let that go and move on to the next one until you get to the destination that you're after, which are your goals. So, yeah, fear and greed, done it quite well so far in this podcast, looking at the notion of biases that can come in, that they can be fairly complex. So just go again with the question specifically you wanted to cover on.
So we've got, out of the biases, so fear and greed, you've then got negative bias, confirmation bias, positive bias.
And overconfidence.
Overconfidence, underconfidence.
So that negative bias, it can be like a pessimistic framework that people look at, glass half full, glass half empty, and that again can be quite a toxic thing. I think learning to be objective about what you see, to try and avoid that sort of bias, understand and prepare for the worst, expect the best, the ball's going to drop somewhere between those two. If you have a constant negative bias, it's going to be very hard for you to do anything because you'll always undermine your self-confidence and your self-belief to actually do it. The other side of the coin, which is just as toxic, is that overconfidence. And I think early on in my trading career, particularly, in the early 90s in the City of London, it's an industry that's dominated by young males. Now,
Young alpha males too, right?
In some cases, they were alpha males. Some people thought they were alpha males, but were betas. They just didn't realise that at the time. And you've worked that out very, very quickly when people are under stress. All of that facade falls away, and you realise there's a beta sitting behind it. They're just pretending. And if you're not true to yourself, you're never going to be successful at anything.
That's right.
So diving into that, and if you think about how dangerous that demographic can be and what they naturally bring in terms of overconfidence. If you look at something totally different as a statistic, and I think numbers don't lie, they give you really good hard information, and sometimes you can extrapolate from that or take that data series and apply it to other things. If you look at the number of road traffic deaths by demographic, and I haven't looked at this for quite some time. Maybe we'll do that after. We probably should have done it before.
We probably should have done it before. Thank you to our production crew, guys.
Yeah, thanks. But this is the joys of being live, right?
That's right.
Road deaths by demographic and age group, you're going to see very specifically there's a skew where road deaths typically orientate to there's an outlier for young males. Because there's more attitude towards risk, or more laissez-faire, laid-back attitude to risk, and more overconfidence in their driving skills. And that male ego, when you bring it into a trading environment, can be exactly the same. And as I say, early in my career, I saw that very early on, a lot of people coming out, all guns blazing, and you go, well, they've got some confidence behind them until it goes wrong and it just melts and it's gone. And so that's overconfidence when there's no skill set to really back it up. So having a process to keep you on keel, where you're objective, you don't have a positive or negative bias towards things. You're objective in that it's not personal, it's just a process and a business decision or a money decision, makes it far easier to build that consistency. And consistency is the first step any trader should really have if they want to be successful. Most people just want to be profitable. They don't want to do the work beforehand, which is number one, to become consistent. And then once they've become consistent, confidence then backfills there naturally, and then you move into the promised land of profit. That consistency comes from a process, which I guess counterbalances those emotions of fear, greed, over or under confidence that we've just talked about.
What about for those who categorize themselves as a spender or a saver? Because that can be a very dangerous psychological bias to have on yourself.
You're right, and our family have always been like this. We've never been good with money. Again, it's an inherited belief, and it's one that you can change in a heartbeat. And I've been on both sides of that ledger. When I was younger, I certainly wasn't a spender. I was my father's son, so I was extremely conservative, worked really hard, saved like Billy-O in my younger days. And then something shifted, and in me, I thought you were the one that was supposed to be on the couch having the therapy sessions.
Well, feel free, we can ask back and forth.
I'm not getting on the couch with you. That would be a bit weird.
Yeah,
we'd have to top and tail.
Everyone's weird once you get to know them.
So for me personally, I think I started to sort of grow, certainly financially, and maybe there was an element of doubt, and you could call it imposter syndrome. We all go through that from time to time, whereby, okay, you're becoming someone that is wealthy. And maybe that opened up a lot of things for me personally as a working class kid that really came from not much to, do you deserve to be here? Is it justified? And that self-doubt is a really strange thing. And now from a spending perspective, I've gone from someone that I wouldn't spend Christmas when I was younger. I was really frugal with money, to then going, oh, well, I can do this, I can afford it. And then going on a really gratuitous kind of chapter. And I was in a good position. It didn't make any real difference to my net worth because I was doing very, very well financially. But all of a sudden, that lifestyle inflation, which I know you're a huge fan of talking about, and something I know you live well with because you're aware of it, it really started to kick in. So all of a sudden, your wardrobe has changed a lot. Certainly my cars changed massively. The kind of trips I was doing changed a lot in terms of travel plans, where you sit on the plane, places you stay, places you eat. And when I look back at that may have been for a number of reasons. I was a bachelor at the time, so that kind of hedonistic, all the accoutrements of success certainly didn't hurt in that space. But that wasn't really me. And then I remember I was sitting in a car I had at the time. I had an Aston Martin at the time. And my dad said to me, he said, did you buy this for you? Or did you buy it for how people treat you?
Probably both, I would guess.
And that prompted me to think a little bit. So that's a really interesting, profound thought. My father's got the ability to keep my feet on the ground. He's done a terrific job my entire life with that, and I really respect that attribute that he has. And so a buddy and I, we've talked about this previously, went through a phase of a no-spend game, right? If you're going to spend more than $100 or $150, you're going to call me first. And we're both spending money like sailors, having a great time, partying, doing all that. And I went to not spending again. And it's a really strange relationship that I've had with spending. And I say, like, people spend sometimes to fill a void in their life, and it doesn't matter how much money you spend, it will never fill that dark void in your life if there's something missing. Your growth comes from within you. That's all just stuff that sits around that. It's been a really interesting sort of cycle of not spending, massively spending, not spending. You ask my wife, she'd say, I don't spend anything. Yet when I do, I tend to sort of go pretty hard with stuff. Cars, watches, wine, trips. I still love those things, but also enjoy sharing them too.
Indeed.
And I guess I'm in a position where I can. It doesn't really make that much difference because I've done the work to kind of get to that space. And I don't say that to big no. It's just, I guess, and I don't say that to justify. I don't have to justify what I do. I can do what I like. It's important to recognize that we do change within ourselves. And I think the most important thing is to recognize why we're changing. And it's always that question of why, which unloads a success pathway to anybody. It's never what it is, it's why. And if you can get to the bottom of why, you understand someone's motivation. And second, you understand yours or somebody else's motivation, you can either correct path if you need to, or you can pour more fuel in the tank and make sure that you're unstoppable in that space. Really, really interesting space. I'm watching you carefully because this year, it's the first time I've seen you spend money in the 8 years we've worked together as you have this year. And that's not a judgment. You've earned every cent of what you have. You work exceptionally hard. You deliver massive value to the business, and you're a high quality person that overachieves and delivers to our clients. So everything you have, you've earned and you deserve. This year, your attitude towards money has shifted. And I know what it is. It was a milestone birthday. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be interesting to see how you then adjust after that milestone birthday to go back to Mitch prior to that, or whether it's a new chapter. I'm watching you carefully, young man.
Well, I think, and this adds to my next point for our listeners.
What's your take on that? Just very quickly, I've told you about what my personal journey has been.
I've definitely shifted a lot this year. And the reason being is because I found myself in a position where I could spend money on things that I like without it inhibiting my progress with respect to my goals. Mm-hmm. So once I got to a situation where my income was healthy enough where I could go to Europe, but also still buy another investment property, I said, that's the year where I can go to Europe because I'm just about to buy another investment property literally right now. Whereas two years ago, it was one or the other. I couldn't have both. Once I got to the situation where I could have both, I decided to have both. But also I think there's certain milestones, as you say, in your life where you hit certain goals. And these are things I've dreamed of since I was a little kid, that once you get there, I had to force myself to smell the roses because there's no good saving all
and
this
you're not
money.
great at rewarding yourself any more than I am either. I understand that.
You know, you get to that point and you say, okay, I've done this, this, and this. Well, go out and enjoy some of it. And that was taking that long-term approach to my goals. Okay, I want X, Y, Z by the time I was this age. Once I knew that I could have all those things, and I did have all those things, I would also reward myself.
So is it your turn to get back on the couch? Is it a stick to say you can't have this until, or is it a carrot to say I've achieved that, now I can? Which way round is it for you?
You can't have this until. That was always my philosophy, just brutal. You can't have this until you do this. I must admit, though, this year I've probably gone overboard at a few times. I've gone through that stage where my wardrobe's changed. I'm about to change my car. So I'm in that situation now. But I must admit that...
I might refer you by the cheapest car your ego will allow you to drive.
Thank you.
I'm not coming from a position of strength on that particular statement, but...
but in that sense, I'm still about to buy another investment property. So it hasn't stopped me from getting what I wanted.
Interesting. And what for me as an observer, I'm not going to say mentor, that's not the right term, but as an observer of someone that's in your life, it'll be really interesting to see how you traverse these waters over these next few months to see if the genie goes back in the bottle or whether it's out and needs a little bit more of an assertive sort of knock of the stopper back in the top of it. It'll be very, very interesting to see how that pans. And
it's been fun.
This is life. And you have to have colour because without it, life is black and white and out of focus. But if you understand, and as you've just articulated, it's not this emotional drift off. It's actually been quite strategic on your part. And we talked about this 18 months ago. You said, when I do this, when it's my birthday next year, this is what my plan is, provided A, B, and C.
Correct.
And I still use that same model for myself too. And so I see a lot of what I do with my decision making DNA-wise in what you're doing too.
Well, you've taught me well, right, from day one.
But it's not just talking about it. It's a conscious, or should I say, almost a subconscious way of approaching those decisions. And just so I've got a property transaction I'm mid of at the moment. It's a very, very complicated property transaction. And my reward when I do it, I've got a particular thing I've been eyeing off for probably about 14 months.
I've heard about this.
And I can get it any time. But I cannot have it until I complete this property transaction. And I'm looking at this thing every day, this item, and it's just like flashing at me like, oh, this stuff I'm just going to get. I can get it. It's not that big. No, because you'd be breaking your process if you do that. And that self-discipline becomes harder and harder, I think, when you've got more choice. Okay, it's a first world problem. You're sitting here, there's going to be people listening to this, oh, it's all right for you guys. At one point in time, I had nothing. So I understand what it's like being hungry and cold and not having anything. And I know what it's like to have a lot. And the reason I'm in the position I am is because I haven't wavered on those processes. I had my little splurge time, and I recognize it myself and put it back in. I'll be watching you.
Oh, yeah. I think the thing that's consistent with both of us is that although we go through periods of extreme saving and maybe some extreme spending, it's never impulsive.
No.
It's only because I've done something or gotten X or saved Y that I've been able to spend.
Okay, so if it's not impulsive, what we're talking about is it's a very deliberate action. It's intentional,
calculated,
and the emotion is taken out of it, and it's a reward, but it doesn't feel like a reward because there's no emotion in it. But it is a reward, and the reward in itself is I've adhered to my process. That for me is enough reward. The thing is incidental. Interesting.
So how do you control your mindset then? For our listeners out there, regardless of whatever stage you're in, let's say you've got a promotion, let's say that you've got an inheritance, let's say that you've won the lotto, whatever it may be, let's say things are starting to shift in your life, good or bad. How do you then control your mindset?
I think the three things, inheritance in particular, or gift or lottery, are almost the worst things that can come into your life. An inheritance, obviously, you've lost someone close to you, which is a period of bereavement too. But if something is gifted to you and you haven't had to work for it, you don't understand the value that's in it because there's been no sacrifice to get to it. And this, it's not like everything's all about sacrifice. We're going to start beating ourselves over the back with the rope. It's not about that. It's about understanding that there's a certain value that comes with money. And that value isn't the dollar value, it's the values that you have on how you're going to steward it. And what I mean by that, in my instance, I've got a young family. I've got a wife and 5 kids, and I'd say that our kids are going to be in a very good and by most people's standards, a very gilded financial upbringing. Yet some of the stuff that I do with them now is to try and imprint those values around money, because they're not growing up in that world. You know, they live in a world that's so far removed from the world I grew up in. They're not spoilt by any stretch. My wife and I are very good at making sure they're not spoilt, but they have so much opportunity to experience things. And yet on the other side of the coin, I try very, very hard to really instill some really different values in them. So for example, on Saturday, I bumped into one of our clients the other day there, and he looked at me funnily, actually. One of the things I religiously do is take my kids to Aldi. Two of the five come to Aldi with me. And the reason I do that is to teach them and understand what the cost of living looks like in the first instance. And secondly, that you can make discretionary choices there. And my son is brilliant at this, because he can tell you the price differences between, say, the two big supermarkets and Aldi for stuff. And he's going, oh, that's really good value. We should get more of that. And he's 8. And he's understood that. And it's not about being penny pinching or miserly, because the utility, the outcome is the same. You've just taken a different, more cost-effective path of getting there. And now for him, we've got some sideline stuff that I do with him on the farm. We're just working. There could be holes in my hand here from stuff I'm doing on the farm.
Looks like he got shot.
Yeah, not quite. That's just hard work with money managers' hands or something like that. Yeah. They're not designed for farming. And I'm showing him how to grow food. And what we just worked on, we just planted some stuff. He said, how much was a packet of seeds and all the seedlings, whatever it was. And then he's worked out and gone, okay. And he said, well, we're going to get some tomatoes. We're going to get like 5 kilos of tomatoes. Yeah, they're $4 a kilo at Aldi. So there's $20 of value coming from that 30-cent seedling. That's a really, and his maths isn't great. He's still working through it, but it's like a 70 return.
How old is he? 5?
8.
Okay.
His maths is ninja. He's definitely inherited that from one of his parents. And it's a 70% or 70x return on money. He actually worked it out. He goes, I'm getting 70. He said, that's great. Why doesn't everyone do this? He's 8.
It's pretty smart.
Yeah.
So it comes back to values, right?
Too right. I mean, the other side of the the other side of the coin is going to Aldi in a Rolls Royce, but there's a reason I've got that car, because of sacrifice. There's a real juxtaposition to sort of see, but it's interesting nonetheless to see where his head is at and what he's able to ascertain at that age. And my goal as a parent with all of my kids is to make sure the money stories they have is that there's an abundant world out there, and you can have anything you want provided you're prepared to be strategic and patient and budget and sacrifice and work hard, and anything is open to you. If you want to miss out any of those steps, you don't want to budget, you don't want to sacrifice, and you don't want to work hard, there's nothing coming. You know, you're reliant then on an inheritance or winning the lottery, which is just pure chance. And that's not a way to live your life. And also what that comes with that is it's not your money you inherited from someone. If you go and blow it, you know, you're going to go, oh, I wasted it. Whereas if it's yours, it's your choice as to what you do. Totally different.
So on the other side of the coin, AB, if there is someone who has some investments or some savings or has a family, and let's say we go through a period of market turmoil, market halves in value, we see another COVID correction, or let's say we have another GFC, there's financial hardship in your family, whatever it may be, you lose your job, for example. Where does the mindset then have to go? Is it about ego? Is it about budgeting? What is it?
It's really hard, particularly, you know, if you look at demographics, males typically have a more evolved ego than the female. That's why women often are better traders than men. And so being wrong, as you would be in a market correction, unless you're skilled enough to have been short and profited from it, is a really hard pill to swallow. So having processes in those scenarios that you can work with to help you is key. If you take the events of 9/11, when everyone was running out of the building, there was a certain demographic that ran into the building, which were the firefighters and first responders and incredibly brave people. You know, we all like to think, oh, I'm a strong male, I'd have done the same thing. I don't think I'd been running in that building.
Yeah, I put my hand up.
I'm programmed differently, and I just don't know that I'd be selfless enough to do that. But there's an example when there's a correction in markets, running towards that opportunity as opposed to bailing for the door. It is very, very similar, and huge opportunities are created in those scenarios because for every seller there's got to be a buyer. And if you've the discipline to have a plan that allows you to firstly have risk management and cut if it's dropping away from you, stop loss or insurance is one, but then where to get back in, because oftentimes after a big turn down, people are very, very slow to get back in. You got to be careful. You don't want a dog to bite you a second time, so to speak. And yet, when you look at more skilled traders, if I take Stu and Jill Garrett, who were our traders of the year last year, and I love talking with Stu particularly because his trading strategy is not dissimilar to the lens I look through. They have a series of exits on the way up, so that by the time markets are close to a high, they've actually closed most of their positions out, and they're back into cash waiting for the retracement to buy back in again, and they've been phenomenally successful at what they've done with that market timing. And if you hear him explain his process, it's about the most unemotional, mechanical, engineered solution you could possibly want. So, good, the market's down, that means we're going to get more money working for us again, versus, oh my God, the market's down, we're getting a hosing here.
Different philosophy,
it's
right?
a totally different lens to look through, a totally different evolution in terms of unemotional process. And I think that they're a very good chance of being a backup for the first time in our history, back-to-back traders of the year, the way they're going this year. They're killing it this year. And that'll be great to see. And it's such a simple process when he articulates. He's very, very good at explaining what he does. And it's such a simple process, but simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. And why it's simple is because it's mechanical and there is zero emotion in that. So that notion of having to look at corrections in markets, which are hairy, don't get me wrong, and for most people that have got an industry super or retail super or managed funds, when those corrections happen, 20-30% wiped out on your account, it is a tragedy if you're moving into retirement, because your retirement asset is a third less than what you thought it was going to be, so is your income. Whereas if you've upskilled enough to park emotion at the door, which is one of the phrases I use every boot camp, leave your emotion out there, we don't have that in here, and recognize opportunity. If you wanted to own BHP yesterday and it was $40 and today it's 30, you'd be climbing over yourself to buy it because you're getting yourself a beautiful discount on the stock's the same. Yet psychologically it's so hard to hit that button when it's on the back of a red candle that's moved down. And so, again, managing that emotion out of the way, I can't stress how important it is.
I think for me it comes down to preparation to add to that, because if you're in a situation where anything does happen, let's say, even more simple, let's say you lose your job, but you've got an emergency fund where you've got 3 to 6 months income saved up to support your family. Well, losing your job, yes, it's sad and it's going to hurt, but it's not the end of the world because you've had the basis loaded. Same thing is if the market crashes and it halves in value, but you've got cash saved up, you can then take that opportunity to invest. Yeah. So I think the preparation and the pre-planning to that all stems back to what you do now in terms of, can you budget to save? And if you have savings, you can prepare. If you're prepared, well, it doesn't matter what happens because you're loaded.
It's exactly right. It's what if scenarios covered off, and these aren't exciting, and most of the time you never need it. In fact, one of my first jobs as a graduate trainee at the bank I was involved with was what was a anti-takeover, or in the event of a run on the bank kind of game plan, a war plan. The defense manual, it was called, and
really,
and code name Adillo, a day in the life of, which was what the name of it was, and we went through all sorts of details in there. For example, if there were a run on the bank, that means you got money flowing out, and the last thing you want people to think is that the bank is not liquid. Yet banks are never liquid because their money is always tied up in money markets, and if you've billions and you've got to start closing money market positions, you're selling into weakness and you're losing money on that too. So one of the things, basic as it would seem, is that we had scheduled in that defense manual a whole bunch of security deliveries to the bank. So it would seem that there was there was nothing in there. It was empty. They're just doing empty deliveries, but they're taking in all the box people. Well, there's plenty of money here. Don't need to pull my money out. It's safe. And that was all planned out, never been used by that particular institution. I'll spare the name of the institution too, because obviously it's reasonably sensitive. But the reality was that was the level of granular planning that we did around a run on the bank, which is just one scenario of what can happen. And if you take that level of planning in real time, oh my God, we're going to run, what are we going to do? You wouldn't think to those sorts of things. These are things that you've planned out in the cool light of day. No emotion, no adrenaline surge, just very objective game plan laid in. And that's what trading has to be. So when the market does this, I do that. When the market does this, I do this. When the market's done something I've never seen before, I take stock and I do this, or I adjust this. And so your game plan is going to evolve. It's never set in stone, because your experience is changing and the way you're going to apply it might change. But nonetheless, if you haven't taken the time to plan it, you're screwed.
That's right. Yep, you got to save, you need to be disciplined, and you need to have a plan with preparation.
Too right. Now, I mean, emotion and money, they are inextricably linked. And if you've suddenly come into a lot of it, you mentioned about lottery earlier before, it reminds me, there was a guy, he got the contract for doing some graffiti decoration at Facebook's headquarters.
David Chow?
David Chow.
That's him.
David Chow. So how's this for a strategy? So he's been approached by Sean Parker from Napster, I think, who was involved with...
Played by Justin Timberlake in the famous movie.
There you go. Hope he's not driving you home. Think about that. And he said, look, you need to do the whole building. He said, look, it's a big building, $60,000. And he said, look, don't take the cash. We could pay you in Facebook stock instead. And this was, way before Facebook
2005, I think, right? Before it listed.
Before it listed. So he's been given Facebook stock, or 60 grand. He took the stock. So this is a person that wasn't motivated by the cash flow of greed. It was someone that was maybe a little bit more, okay, there could be something going on here with this business. I'll take the punt. I won't chase the money. I'll just see if this pans out.
Disciplined approach.
Yeah. So Facebook listed at $38. So that put his net worth that day at 200 million. Not a bad job for painting an office.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And obviously, subsequently with Facebook, was it $140 or thereabouts, and maybe a little further than that now.
So it's like $1 billion position.
It's just under $1 billion. Now, you talk about a windfall in your life and how you go about stewarding that. That's an interesting one to come into, because you've actually earned that money. You took the punt that you weren't going to take cash. I play the long game here and take stock. And that long-term lens that you've looked through is turned into $1 billion asset.
Do we know how he spent it?
I don't reckon he spent all of it.
I'd hope not. That's a lot of money to spend.
I'd say I think from what I see, he still lives in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, big warehouse full of cars and various other things like that. But still quite grounded. I actually saw an interview with him on something not so long ago, and just a really grounded, knockabout sort of person. Because I don't think he chased the money. I think he just chased I'll stay in it and see what happened. He wasn't motivated by the greed. He was just motivated by an opportunity.
Well, that's a good way to show how having that bias and being objective, as you say, can pay off in spades, right?
100%. And gee, can you imagine what the option income would be like that on Facebook?
Oof, yeah, it'd be a bit.
Big capital gains tax bill there.
Yeah,
too.
I'd say so. Either which way, though, as we can see, emotion plays such a large part in money when it comes to saving, budgeting, investing, and everything.
Too right. And look, this conversation has probably bounced around a little bit by what we normally do. I mean, it's been quite personal in terms of some of the things that we've talked about. And, money is a very unemotional subject. That's the cut and thrust of this particular podcast and particularly our conversation today. Yet a lot of people can't get their head around that, because right now they're at a stage where they haven't developed the objectivity around that. Hopefully, opening up and sharing some of the personal anecdotes in our life. I know this wasn't on the script today.
Not at all.
We've probably run a fair bit over time too. But hopefully, by sort of opening the door a little bit on some of the personal challenges that we face and that we live through and phases that we've gone through, will help people look at this and go, I'm not doing anything wrong. This is just a normal part of the journey. Quicker you can get a strategy and a game plan and no emotion in play and an action plan that you actually follow through and stick with, is how you win this game. And there's no room for emotion in that action plan. It's got to be an emotive goal at the end of it, whether it in your case might be freedom or whether it's something else for other people. You've got to have that emotion there is the thing, the stick in the carrot that's going to drive you. But that's the only emotion in this. The process in itself is cold, hard, binary, yes, no, if no type decisions.
Very nice, AB. Thank you very much for today.
My pleasure. Anytime, Mitch. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.